She was too weak to stand, but strong enough to protect one small photograph. The rain had passed before dawn, leaving Highway 64 glazed with silver water and the low fields outside Cedar Falls buried beneath a cold gray mist. Staff Sergeant Owen Walker was driving home from the rescue equipment shop when something moved in the ditch beside the road. At first, he thought it was a torn tarp caught in the reeds. Then the shape lifted its head. Owen eased his truck onto the shoulder and killed the engine. The silence that followed was broken only by water slipping through the culvert and the distant rumble of the river, swollen from 3 days of storms. He stepped down into the mud, boots sinking nearly an inch, and raised the flashlight from his glove compartment. The beam found a German shepherd lying on her side beneath a tangle of wet grass. Her sable coat was dark with mud, black along the spine, lighter around the chest and legs. One ear stood upright. The other leaned slightly from exhaustion. Her amber eyes followed Owen without blinking. "Easy, girl," he said. His voice came out softer than he expected. The dog tried to lift herself, but her front leg gave way. She settled back into the ditch with a shallow breath. Owen moved closer and saw that one paw was pressed firmly against the ground. Beneath it was something white, no larger than a playing card. He crouched several feet away. "What are you holding?" The shepherd's lips tightened, but no bark came. No warning growl. She simply lowered her head over the object as if her body had become its final shelter. Owen had seen working dogs protect equipment, wounded handlers, even a doorway they had been ordered to guard. This was different. Whatever lay beneath her palm mattered more to her than the cold, the pain, or the stranger kneeling in front of her. Owen removed his olive field jacket and placed it on the grass within her reach. The dog watched him, breathing unevenly. "I am not taking it from you," he said. "I am trying to help." For several seconds, nothing changed. Then her paw shifted half an inch. Owen saw the corner of a photograph, bent and stained by rain. He reached slowly, stopping whenever her eyes sharpened. When his fingers touched the edge, the shepherd placed her paw over his hand. Not hard, just enough to hold him there. Owen looked into her face. "You need me to see it." The dog released him. He lifted the photograph carefully. It showed a little girl, perhaps 9 years old, standing in front of a wooden cabin with both arms wrapped around the same shepherd. The girl wore a yellow raincoat and had a gap between her front teeth. The dog looked younger in the picture, but the amber eyes were unmistakable. One corner of the photograph had been torn away, leaving part of the cabin missing. Owen turned it over. 3 words had been written in blue ink, blurred but readable. "North window, please." His chest tightened. He looked back at the ditch. The shepherd had forced herself upright. Her injured leg trembled beneath her, yet her attention was no longer on Owen. She was staring across the road toward the hills beyond the river. A warning siren sounded faintly from Cedar Falls, signaling that the water was still rising. "Where is she?" Owen asked. The dog took one unsteady step toward the road and nearly fell. Owen caught her beneath the chest before she hit the mud. She was lighter than she should have been, all wet fur, bone, and determination. As he lifted her into his arms, the photograph remained trapped between his fingers and her paw. She would not let it go. Owen carried her toward the truck, feeling the weak beat of her heart against his sleeve. At the passenger door, the shepherd raised her head and looked north again. Not toward safety, toward the person she had left behind. Owen opened the door and laid her gently across the seat. The moment he tried to close it, she struggled up and pressed her nose against the window, eyes fixed on the flooded hills. Owen understood then. He had not found a dog waiting to be rescued. He had found the only witness still trying to lead someone home. Owen drove toward Cedar Falls with the German shepherd stretched across the passenger seat, her head resting near the door and her eyes fixed on the northern hills. Every few minutes, she tried to rise. Each time, her injured leg trembled and she sank back down, still guarding the photograph beneath one paw. Owen kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other close enough to steady her if the truck hit a rough patch. The road curved along the river, where muddy water pushed against tree trunks and carried broken branches downstream. Warning lights flashed near the bridge, and county workers were placing barriers along the shoulder. Owen knew the route well. 6 years earlier, he had driven the same stretch under another hard rain, answering a call he still heard in his sleep. His wife, Sarah, and their daughter, Emma, had been on their way home from a school concert when the weather turned. By the time Owen reached them, the road was already closed. He had spent years believing that one more minute, one different choice, one earlier turn might have changed everything. Since then, he repaired rescue ladders, winches, and emergency radios at the county shop, but he never joined the crews who used them. He told himself he was more useful behind a workbench. The truth was simpler. He could fix equipment. He could not face another family waiting for someone who might not arrive. The shepherd shifted and released a faint breath. Owen looked at the photograph lying beneath her paw. The little girl's yellow raincoat reminded him of Emma's favorite jacket, bright enough to be seen from across a playground. The resemblance was not exact, but grief did not need accuracy. It only needed a doorway. Not today, Owen whispered, though he did not know whether he was speaking to the memory or the fear. The dog lifted her head at the sound of his voice. Her amber eyes met his for a moment, then returned to the hills. Owen turned into the parking lot of Cedar Falls Veterinary Clinic just after 6 in the morning. The building was dark except for a light above the rear entrance. He called the emergency number posted on the door. 10 minutes later, Dr. Claire Reynolds arrived in jeans, work boots, and a raincoat thrown over hospital scrubs. She opened the passenger door and stopped when she saw the photograph. "She has been holding that the whole time?" Claire asked. "Since I found her." Together, they lifted the shepherd onto a rolling stretcher. The dog remained calm until Claire tried to slide the photograph aside. Her paw moved instantly, covering it again. Claire paused. "All right, it stays." Inside the clinic, warm air carried the clean smell of soap and antiseptic. Claire examined the dog while Owen stood near the table. The shepherd was dehydrated, exhausted, and suffering from a severe sprain, but Claire found no broken bones. "She has been traveling for a while," she said. "At least 2 days, maybe 3. Owen studied the mud packed between the dog's pads. "She came from north of the river." Claire nodded toward the photograph. "Then that child may still be there." She gave the shepherd water in small amounts and wrapped the injured leg. The dog drank, but only after Owen placed the photograph beside the bowl. When Claire dimmed the lights to let her rest, the shepherd refused to lie down. She stood unsteadily and faced the clinic door. "She needs sleep," Owen said. Claire watched the dog scratch once at the floor, then turned toward the sound of a rescue helicopter passing overhead. "No," she said quietly. "She thinks someone else does not have time to wait." Owen looked at the clock on the wall. The date beneath it was circled in red for a staff meeting. He barely saw the note. He saw only the day, June 17th, Emma's birthday. The shepherd pressed her nose against the door and looked back at him. For 6 years, Owen had treated that date like a room he could not enter. Now a wounded dog stood beside the exit, asking him to walk through it. Dr. Claire Reynolds waited until the shepherd had finished a second bowl of water before checking the worn leather collar beneath her sable fur. The metal tag was bent almost flat, its engraved letters hidden under dried mud. Claire cleaned it with a damp cloth while Owen stood beside the examination table, watching the dog's eyes follow every movement. "Hope," Claire read softly. The name changed something in the room. The shepherd lifted her head. Owen repeated it. "Hope." Her ears moved toward him, and for the first time since the ditch, some of the tension left her face. Claire turned the tag over. An address was still visible beneath the scratches. 418 Willow Bend Road. Owen knew the neighborhood. It sat north of the river near Pine Creek, where several homes had been evacuated after the flood. Claire reached for the clinic phone and called Sheriff Daniel Brooks. He arrived 15 minutes later wearing a dark rain jacket over his uniform, water still shining on the shoulders. He was a broad man in his late 40s with a patient voice and the tired eyes of someone who had not slept since the storms began. The moment he saw the photograph, his expression tightened. "That is Lily Harper," he said. 9 years old. Missing since Tuesday night. Owen looked at Hope. The dog had gone completely still. Her mother? Rachel Harper was pulled from a flooded vehicle near Millstone Bridge. She is at Cedar Falls Medical Center. She has not been awake long enough to tell us much. Brooks placed the photograph beneath the examination light. Search teams covered the roads, the riverbank, and 3 abandoned properties. "We found no sign of Lily or the dog." Claire pointed toward Hope's paws. "This dog traveled for days with an injured leg. She did not come south by accident." Brooks exhaled slowly. The northern search was suspended at midnight. Another storm front is moving in by late afternoon, and the bridge access is unstable. Hope heard Lily's name again. She pushed herself upright, stepped off the padded mat, and limped toward the clinic door. Claire caught her gently before she fell. Easy, girl. Hope pulled forward anyway. Her claws tapped against the tile. Once. Twice. Then she looked back at the three adults as if their stillness made no sense. Brooks shook his head. She cannot lead a search like this. She will try, Claire said. With or without us. Owen studied the tiny photograph. The cabin behind Lily looked ordinary at first, but the words on the back kept returning to him. North window. Please. He turned the picture toward the light. Hope watched his hands, breathing faster. One corner had been torn away, and along the remaining edge, a narrow stripe of white reflected from the cabin glass. Owen looked closer. It was not paint. It was the shape of another building caught in the window. This photograph is showing more than the cabin, he said. Brooks stepped nearer. What do you see? A reflection. Maybe a roofline. Hope struck the door once with her paw. Claire secured a soft support wrap around the injured leg, but the dog refused food and would not settle. Every sound from outside pulled her attention toward the parking lot. A truck passed. She rose. A helicopter crossed overhead. She rose again. When rain began tapping the clinic windows, Hope lifted the photograph carefully in her mouth and carried it to Owen. She placed it against his boot, then sat despite the pain in her leg. The gesture was simple, but it reached deeper than any order. Owen had spent 6 years avoiding desperate families, emergency calls, and roads washed silver by rain. He had convinced himself that staying behind a workbench was not fear. Hope did not know any of that. She only knew Lily was missing and Owen had stopped. Brooks unfolded a county map across the counter. If we go, we need a starting point. Owen placed the photograph beside it. Hope leaned forward and pressed her nose against the northern side of Pine Creek. Then she looked directly at him. Owen felt the old resistance rise inside his chest, followed by something quieter and stronger. He picked up his field jacket. Get the rescue truck ready, he said. She has already waited long enough. The rescue truck left Cedar Falls just after 7 in the morning, carrying Owen, Sheriff Brooks, Hope, and enough equipment for a search that none of them could predict. The road north narrowed quickly, passing flooded fields where fence posts rose from brown water like markers in a forgotten graveyard. Hope lay on a folded blanket between the front seats, her wrapped legs stretched carefully before her, but she did not rest. Every curve brought her head up. Every side road made her ears turn. Brooks drove while Owen held the photograph beneath the dashboard light, studying the cabin, the torn corner, and the pale reflection in the north window. Willow Bend is another 2 miles, Brooks said. The Harper place is beyond that. Hope rose before the truck slowed. She pressed her nose toward the windshield and gave a low sound. Brooks turned onto a gravel lane bordered by sycamores and stopped near a wooden cabin standing above Pine Creek. Water had reached the lowest porch step, but the structure remained intact. A child's red bicycle leaned against the railing. Owen felt Hope move through him too quickly. This could be it. Hope limped down the ramp Brooks unfolded for her. She reached the yard, paused, and looked at the cabin. Then she turned away. Hope, Owen called softly. The dog ignored the open porch and moved along the edge of the property, nose testing the wind. Brooks approached the front door and knocked. No answer. The lock was broken, so they entered carefully. Inside, a small radio played a children's lullaby through weak speakers. A yellow raincoat hung beside the door. On the couch lay a blanket printed with silver stars. Owen's chest tightened. Everything said Lily had been there. Claire had packed a small evidence pouch, and Owen used it to collect a strand of light brown hair from the blanket. Brooks checked the rooms. No one here. In the kitchen, 2 cans of dog food stood open beside an empty bowl. A glass of water sat on the table, half full and covered with dust except for one clear fingerprint along the rim. She may have sheltered here after the flood, Brooks said. Owen nodded, but the room felt wrong. The radio was still playing, yet Hope refused to enter. She stood outside beneath the north window, staring up at the glass. Owen stepped back onto the porch. What is it, girl? Hope lifted one paw and touched the wall beneath the window. Then she looked toward the valley. Owen followed her gaze. Across the creek, through mist and bare branches, another roofline rose above the trees. White siding. A narrow chimney. The shape was nearly identical to the pale stripe reflected in the photograph. He looked down at the picture again. The cabin behind Lily was not the building they were standing in. The north window had captured another house across the water. "Brooks," Owen called. "This is the wrong cabin." The sheriff came outside and studied the view. "That property belongs to the old Millstone Church Trust. It has been empty for years." Owen held the photograph beside the window until the reflection aligned. The missing corner would have shown the entire roofline. "This picture was taken here, but Lily was pointing us there." Hope limped toward the creek path at once. Brooks checked his radio. "The bridge crossing is half a mile east, but county crews reported water over the approach." A low rumble moved through the valley as the river pressed against the banks. Clouds thickened above the ridge, darker than before. Hope kept walking. Owen caught up and placed a hand lightly on her back. "You cannot cross that water." She looked at him, then at the house across the creek. There was no fear in her face, only certainty. Brooks unfolded a topographic map across the truck hood. An old forestry trail curved north, climbed above the floodplain, and crossed Pine Creek near a disused service bridge. The route added nearly 7 miles. "If the bridge still stands, we can reach the other side," he said. Hope pressed her nose against the map where the trail began. Owen looked at the darkening sky, then at the dog beside him. The first cabin had offered them signs of Lily, but not Lily herself. It was not a failure. It was a message. They had been searching the place she had left. Now Hope was asking them to trust the place she remembered. Brooks turned the rescue truck onto the old forestry road while Hope rested against Owen's leg, her eyes fixed through the windshield. The trail climbed away from the flooded valley, narrowing between cedar trunks and slopes washed clean by rain. Mud pulled at the tires. Fallen branches scraped along the doors. Every mile north took them farther from Cedar Falls and closer to the dark line of weather gathering beyond the ridge. Owen kept the photograph in his hand, tracing the torn edge with his thumb. The missing corner bothered him. It felt less like damage and more like an unfinished sentence. At the next overlook, Brooks stopped to check the service bridge below. From the truck, they could see the old steel span stretching across Pine Creek, rusted but still standing above the rushing water. Hope lifted her head before either man spoke. "We walk from here," Brooks said. Owen opened the rear compartment and pulled out rope, a medical pack, and a collapsible rescue ladder. Hope tried to jump down, but her wrapped leg buckled. Owen caught her and lowered her gently. "You do not have to prove anything," he murmured. Hope touched her nose to the photograph in his hand, then moved toward the bridge. They crossed single file. The metal grating trembled beneath their boots, and cold spray rose from the creek below. On the far side, the forestry trail disappeared under storm debris. Hope left the road and followed a narrow deer path uphill. Owen watched her carefully. She did not search randomly. She paused at each bend, tested the air, and chose with the calm certainty of memory. After nearly an hour, they reached an abandoned picnic shelter beside a collapsed water tower. Hope stopped beneath the tower and looked back. Owen raised the photograph. Along the torn edge, behind Lily's yellow sleeve, a thin gray curve remained. He turned toward the tower. The shape matched. "This was in the missing corner," he said. Brooks stepped closer. Then the house across the creek was only part of it. Owen studied the landscape. Beyond the tower, half hidden by trees, stood the white steeple of an old church. The same structure appeared as a pale reflection in the photograph. Millstone, 7 miles north, just as the old county map showed. The clues had been there from the beginning, but the torn corner had kept them separate. Hope moved past the tower and followed a weed-covered lane toward the deserted settlement. Most of the buildings had been empty for years. A grocery store with boarded windows. A schoolhouse leaning toward the road. A church whose bell rope hung loose beneath the steeple. The air smelled of wet wood, clay, and approaching rain. Brooks checked his radio, but only static answered. "Storm is moving faster than predicted," he said. A low roll of thunder crossed the hills. Hope suddenly stopped beside the church steps. She looked toward a 2-story house, standing on higher ground at the edge of town. White siding, dark shutters, one north-facing window beneath the roof. Owen felt his pulse quicken. "That is it." Hope started forward, limping harder now, but refusing to slow. The front yard was tangled with waist-high grass, and floodwater had left a brown mark along the porch posts. No vehicle stood nearby. No smoke rose from the chimney. Brooks called Lily's name from the gate. Nothing answered. Owen looked at the photograph once more. Lily was smiling in front of the first cabin, but her eyes were turned slightly away from the camera, toward the reflection in the glass. Toward this house. She knew where Hope would look, he said. They reached the porch. The front door was locked, and the windows on the first floor were covered from inside with blankets. Brooks knocked hard and called again. Silence. Hope did not approach the door. She circled the house, nose low, then hurried to the backyard. Owen and Brooks followed. There, beneath the north window, Hope sat and stared upward. The glass was fogged from within. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the curtain shifted. A small hand appeared against the window. It pressed to the glass for one brief moment before slipping out of sight. Owen dropped the photograph and ran toward the house. Owen reached the back door first and pulled against the handle, but the swollen wood would not move. Brooks came beside him, tested the frame, then pointed toward a narrow side entrance half hidden beneath climbing vines. Hope remained under the north window, staring upward with absolute focus. Lily, Owen called. My name is Owen. Hope is here. For a moment, the house answered only with the soft rattle of rain against the siding. Then a weak voice came from above. Hope. The shepherd rose so quickly that her injured leg nearly gave way. She pressed both front paws against the wall and released a low, trembling sound. The voice returned, clearer this time. I knew you would come back. Owen felt the words move through him, but there was no time to stand still. Brooks forced the side door open, and they entered a hallway filled with damp air and the smell of old wood. Water had reached the lower floor days earlier, leaving mud along the walls and broken furniture pushed against the baseboards. The staircase to the second floor had collapsed near the middle, its upper section hanging at an angle. Owen looked toward the ceiling. There is no safe way up. Brooks checked the rear rooms while Owen returned outside for the collapsible ladder. Thunder rolled closer now, deep and slow. Hope followed him to the equipment pack, then back to the north wall. She sat beneath the window as he extended the ladder against the siding. Stay with her, Owen told Brooks. The sheriff nodded and steadied the base. Owen climbed, one rung at a time, the metal cold beneath his hands. At the window, fog covered the glass from inside. He tapped gently. A small face appeared through the haze. Lily Harper stood wrapped in a faded blanket, her light brown hair tangled around her cheeks. She looked tired, but her eyes were open. Owen raised one hand. You are safe now. Lily glanced past him toward the ground. Hope was standing below, looking up. The girl touched the glass with both palms. Owen carefully lifted the window, but the frame stuck halfway. He worked it loose until there was enough space to climb through. The room beyond had once been a child's bedroom. Books were stacked near the bed, and an empty food jar sat beside a bottle with only a little water left. Lily held something close to her chest. Can you walk? Owen asked. She nodded, then looked toward the broken staircase. I tried, but the floor moved. You did the right thing by staying here. She opened her hand. Inside was the missing corner of the photograph. The torn piece showed the old water tower, the church steeple, and the full reflection of the White House. Owen took out the other half from his jacket. When he placed the pieces together, the picture became whole. Lily stood between Rachel and Hope in front of the cabin, all three smiling into the afternoon sun. On the back of the missing piece, written in the same blue ink, were two more words. Find Hope. Owen looked at Lily. You tore the picture? She nodded. Mom said if we got separated, Hope would remember the house. I kept one part, and I put the other under her collar. Owen understood. The flood had split the family, but Lily had turned one photograph into two promises. He wrapped her in his field jacket and helped her through the window. Brooks guided her onto the ladder from below. Hope moved closer with every rung. When Lily reached the ground, the shepherd pressed her head into the girl's arms and stood perfectly still. Lily buried her face in the damp fur. Neither of them made a sound. Owen descended last, carrying the joined photograph. The first heavy drops of the new storm began to fall around them. Brooks called for the rescue truck over the radio as the signal returned in broken bursts. Lily kept one hand on Hope's collar. Mom, she asked. She is alive, Brooks said. She is waiting for you. Lily closed her eyes, and Hope leaned against her side. Owen watched them beneath the darkening sky. He had once believed that arriving late meant arriving without purpose. But standing there, with the house behind him and the reunited photograph in his hand, he understood that some rescues begin long before anyone knows they have been called. The storm reached Millstone before the rescue truck did. Rain swept across the abandoned street in silver sheets, drumming against the church roof and turning the dirt lane into a ribbon of mud. Brooks led Lily beneath the shelter of the old grocery store awning while Owen guided Hope beside them. The shepherd was exhausted now. Her wrapped legs shook with every step, yet she refused to leave Lily's side. When Brooks tried to lift her into the truck bed, Hope pulled back and pressed against the girl's knee. "She rides with me," Lily said. Her voice was weak, but certain. Owen spread a rescue blanket across the rear seat and helped them both inside. Hope settled with her head in Lily's lap, eyes half closed for the first time since the ditch. The drive back toward Cedar Falls was slow. Water crossed the forestry road in shallow streams, and the old service bridge groaned beneath the weight of the truck. Brooks kept both hands tight on the wheel. Owen sat beside Lily, holding the two pieces of the photograph together inside a clear evidence sleeve. Every few minutes, Lily looked down at Hope as if checking that she was still real. "She left when the water came in," Lily said quietly. "I told her to find Mom." Owen glanced toward her. "She found help instead." Lily shook her head. "No, she found you." The words settled between them. Outside, trees bent under the wind. Owen looked at the dog's mud-streaked face and remembered the first moment in the ditch, that paw covering the photograph, that refusal to let the last clue wash away. Hope had not chosen the nearest house, the nearest car, or the first person she saw. She had stayed on the road until someone stopped. "Why did you write North Window?" Owen asked. Lily touched the edge of the photograph through the plastic. "Mom said if we ever got separated, I should go to the room with the north window. It was the highest room in the house." She paused. Hope knew it too. Brooks glanced at them in the mirror. "Your mother was smart." Lily nodded, then looked at Owen. "Do you have a family?" The question was simple. That made it harder. Owen felt the old wall rise inside him, built from 6 years of silence and careful avoidance. He could have answered no. It would have been easier. Instead, he watched Hope breathe against Lily's coat and heard the rain moving over the truck roof like distant applause. "I had a wife," he said. "Her name was Sarah." Lily waited. Owen swallowed. "And a daughter." The next word felt heavier than all the others. For 6 years, he had kept it locked behind his teeth, afraid that speaking it would reopen a place that had never truly closed. Lily did not rush him. Hope lifted her head and looked toward him. Owen met the dog's amber eyes. Her name was Emma. The name entered the truck softly. Nothing broke. The road remained beneath them. The rain kept falling. Lily reached into the evidence sleeve and touched the torn edge of the photograph. "Maybe she helped Hope find you," she said. Owen looked out the window toward the flooded fields. He did not know what he believed about signs, or timing, or the quiet ways one life could reach another. But he knew that morning had begun on Emma's birthday, with a wounded dog waiting in a ditch and a photograph protected beneath her paw. He knew that for the first time in years, saying his daughter's name had not felt like losing her again. It had felt like letting her walk beside him. When the truck reached the county road, emergency lights appeared through the rain. A medical team waited near the bridge. Lily tightened her arms around Hope as the vehicle stopped. "You stay with me," she whispered. Hope touched her nose to the girl's wrist. Owen opened the door and stepped into the storm, carrying the joined photograph. Behind him, Lily called his name. When he turned, she held out one half of the picture. "Keep this until we see Mom." Owen accepted it carefully. For the first time, the photograph was no longer only a clue. It was trust passed from one wounded heart to another. The medical team moved quickly, but no one separated Lily from Hope. A paramedic wrapped the girl in a warm blanket and checked her breathing while another examined the shepherd's bandaged leg beneath the open rear doors of the rescue truck. Rainwater streamed from the roof in steady curtains, yet inside the small pool of emergency light, the world seemed to narrow around the child and the dog pressed against her. Owen stood nearby with the torn photograph in his hand, the half Lily had trusted him to keep. Sheriff Brooks spoke quietly with the crew, arranging transport to Cedar Falls Medical Center and calling ahead to confirm that Rachel Harper was awake. When Lily heard her mother's name, her face changed. Exhaustion remained, but hope moved through it. "She knows I am coming?" she asked. Brooks nodded. "She knows now." Hope lifted her head at the sound of Rachel's name. Even tired, she remembered. The ambulance could not take the dog, so Owen drove behind it with Hope lying across the passenger seat, one paw resting on the center console. The storm weakened as they entered town. Streetlights reflected across wet pavement, and people stood beneath awnings watching the emergency vehicles pass. Owen kept his eyes on the road, but every few seconds he glanced at Hope. Her breathing had settled. For the first time, she was no longer looking north. At the hospital entrance, Lily waited in a wheelchair beneath the covered walkway, refusing to go inside until Hope arrived. The moment Owen opened the truck door, the shepherd tried to jump down. He caught her gently and carried her across the pavement. Lily reached for her, and Hope leaned forward until their foreheads touched. The reunion with Rachel happened in a quiet recovery room on the third floor. Rachel looked smaller than Owen expected, pale beneath the hospital blanket. But when Lily entered, she opened both arms. No one spoke for several seconds. Lily crossed the room and folded into her mother's embrace, while Hope stood beside the bed, tail moving slowly against the floor. Rachel buried one hand in the dog's fur and the other in her daughter's hair. The sound she made was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. It was the sound of something broken, realizing it had not been lost forever. Owen remained near the doorway. He had delivered the missing half of the photograph, but entering the room felt harder than crossing the flooded bridge. Lily noticed him first. "You still have it," she said. Owen held up the photograph. Rachel looked at him. "You are the one who found Hope." "She found me," he answered. Lily reached for the picture, then placed both halves together on the bedside table. Rachel traced the torn line with one finger. "We took that at Pine Creek last spring," she said. Lily wanted Hope in every picture. Lily smiled faintly. She always moves before the camera. Hope rested her chin on the mattress as if listening. Rachel looked toward Owen again. "Thank you for stopping." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of every person who had ever needed someone to stop. Owen lowered his eyes. "I almost did not." Lily studied him with the direct honesty of a child. "But you did." He looked at the joined photograph, at Hope's muddy paw near the frame, at Rachel holding her daughter as if the world had returned to its proper place. Then Lily asked quietly, "What was your daughter's name?" Owen felt the old ache rise, but it no longer closed his throat. "Emma," he said. Rachel repeated it softly, giving the name room in the air. Hope lifted one paw and placed it over Owen's hand where it rested beside the bed. No one moved it away. Outside the window, the clouds began to separate, revealing a narrow band of evening light above Cedar Falls. Owen had believed grief demanded silence. In that room, he learned that love could survive being spoken. The miracle was not that the past had changed. It was that, for one quiet moment, it no longer stood between him and the living. 1 month later, the river had returned to its banks, leaving pale lines of dried silt along the trees and a quiet shine across the fields outside Cedar Falls. The storms had passed, but their memory remained in repaired fences, fresh gravel, and the careful way people watched the sky. Owen drove north on a clear Saturday morning with the windows open and Emma's old photograph tucked inside the pocket of his olive jacket. He had not taken it from the drawer in years. Now he carried it without fear. Rachel and Lily were staying in a small white farmhouse outside town while their home near Pine Creek was repaired. Hope had recovered enough to walk without a wrap, though she still favored her front leg after long distances. When Owen turned into the gravel drive, the German shepherd was already waiting near the porch. She lifted her ears, then ran toward the truck with a movement that was almost a leap. Lily followed more slowly, laughing as Hope reached Owen before the engine stopped. He stepped out, and the dog placed both front paws against his chest. "Easy, girl," he said, smiling as he steadied her. Hope dropped back to the ground and pressed her head against his hand. Rachel came onto the porch carrying a small wooden frame. "She has been watching the road since breakfast," she said. Inside the farmhouse, morning light filled the kitchen. The repaired photograph rested beneath new glass, its torn lines still visible down the middle. Rachel had not hidden the damage. She had joined the pieces with a narrow strip of blue paper on the back, leaving the front exactly as it was. Lily set the frame on the table beside another picture taken 2 weeks earlier at the river overlook. In the new photograph, Rachel stood with one hand on Lily's shoulder. Hope sat between them. Owen stood at the edge, uncertain but smiling. "You were trying to leave the picture," Lily said. "Hope would not let you." Owen looked at the shepherd lying beneath the table. She has strong opinions. Lily reached into a drawer and brought out the original bent collar tag, cleaned until the name was clear again. Hope. Rachel had attached it to a new leather collar, soft and wide enough not to press against the dog's neck. Lily knelt and fastened it gently. Hope waited with solemn patience, then shook once, making the tag ring against the buckle. The small sound filled the kitchen like a bell. Owen took Emma's photograph from his pocket. It showed a girl with bright eyes and a yellow jacket standing beside him beneath a summer sky. He placed it beside the repaired picture. No one asked him to explain. Rachel only moved the frames closer together. Hope rose, came to Owen, and rested one paw across his hand. It was the same quiet gesture she had made in the ditch and again beside Rachel's hospital bed. This time, nothing was hidden beneath it. No clue, no warning, no final message waiting to be understood. Only warmth. Lily looked at the two photographs and smiled. Now nobody is missing. Owen felt the truth of the words without needing to correct them. Sarah and Emma were gone. That had not changed. Yet their names were no longer sealed inside a room he could not enter. They had become part of the light on the table, part of the reason he had stopped his truck, part of the road that led him here. Later, they walked to the edge of the property where the fields opened toward the hills. Hope moved ahead with Lily, pausing often to check that everyone followed. A soft rain began without warning, warm and light, barely enough to darken the dust. Owen lifted his face to it. 6 years earlier, rain had become the sound of everything he had lost. Now it fell across Lily's laughter, Rachel's quiet voice, and Hope's paws moving through the grass. He did not turn away. The dog looked back once, amber eyes bright beneath the gray sky, then continued toward home. Owen followed, carrying no photograph in his hands, because none of them needed guarding anymore.